Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Verbal to Visual podcast. I am your host, Doug Neal, and today we are talking with Paul Joy, who is exploring a variety of sketchnoting opportunities in front of him. He represents someone who has passed the intermediate stage of skill development. He's been sharing his work for a while now, and these in-person and remote freelance gigs are coming up, and he's in the process of deciding which of those opportunities to say yes to, and even how to identify himself and the type of work he does. So I think this is a great conversation for anyone who's looking to go pro or semi-pro with their sketchnoting skills, because the reality is that this is an in-demand skill, making complex ideas visual and understandable. So I think you're really going to enjoy this one. You can find the show notes for today's episode at verbaltovisual.com/8. Let's get into it. All right, welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to kick it to you right away to let you know, or for you to let listeners know who you are, where you're coming from, and what you're up to with your sketchnoting skills.
Thanks, Doug. I'm Paul. I'm in Australia, Melbourne, Australia at the moment, and have been and interestingly have had a number of late night, early morning calls with Doug over the last few years, while Verbal to Visual has been up and coming on various different platforms. And it's good to talk with you again, Doug. And thanks for this opportunity. Probably as a result of Verbal to Visual and Doug's teaching and the opportunity to connect, I've been part of sketchnoting for, I would have to say, 5+ years. Had a background in probably an interest in art. Certainly when I was very young, got a calligraphy set and loved hand lettering, and seemed to have fairly quickly an affinity with that, and enjoyed doing it, and was happy to practice, the letter A over and over again. Like I remember so clearly pages and pages, line after line of the letter A, and then another page of the letter B, and all the sort of practicing that I don't know that I would have the discipline or the patience to do now. But when I was younger, I did it because I loved it, and as a result, I've got pretty nice, neat handwriting. I enjoyed art as a kid growing up. I'm now a teacher and a school chaplain here in Melbourne, Australia, and find it interesting, writing on the board as such, a whiteboard. When you can keep that neat and tidy, and you can draw a picture every now and then, it helps to keep the students engaged. I've been able to transition that into speaking as a chaplain to an assembly or to a chapel service, and bit by bit introducing some sketch note type images into those stories and into those messages. And as a result of sharing, some photographs of my work or my art and my sketch notes, have had the opportunity over a number of years now, really, to contribute to various conversations and various publications, actually, using my art, using my sketchnoting, using my hand lettering to be part of a colouring book, a hand-lettered colouring book where I ended up becoming the artist. It was a project that they thought they might get 10 or 12 different artists to contribute to, and when they saw what I was doing and how I was doing it and contributing to their particular community, I became the artist, and we made a colouring book. That's part of the Miracle Morning with Hal Elrod. It's called The Art of Affirmations, and so that's a pretty cool group of publications with Hal that it's nice to have my name on one. But yeah, so I guess with that as a backdrop of a bit of hand lettering, a bit of art, and a bit of kind of coming to sketchnoting around, really, Mike Rohde was probably one of the first who I heard talk about the phrase, the term, and as a result, I explored it, loved it, kind of fairly quickly understood how it worked for me, and now in a position where I'm more public with what I do and sharing it and enjoying the process, enjoying the learning, and still feel I've got a lot to learn, but enjoying it along the way.
That's so great. It's been fun to see your work and see some of that sharing since you have been kind of part of this verbal to visual community. So that's been really fun from my perspective. And I remember when you first came in and started sharing your work, and it was clear from the beginning that you had this strong background in both your kind of drawing, cartooning skills, but then also, as you mentioned, like hand lettering. And there's something like I'm almost envious of that freedom in youth, I guess, that I feel like is hard to maintain once you reach a certain level of adulthood. Even just allowing yourself to like spend that amount of time, like just writing a single letter over and over again. I almost wish there was a way to, and I suppose there is, if you just do it intentionally. I find it easy these days to, um, maybe focus a little bit too much on like purposeful practice, or it has to be like work that's leading up to something, as opposed to just writing that letter because you enjoy it. So I think there's something that we can try to bring into our sketchnoting um, practice, or just more the enjoyment. I feel like that speaks to the enjoyment of a craft when you allow yourself to do that. So just wanted to point out that as a piece of your story that kind of resonated with me.
Yeah,
Um,
and if I can just speak to that for a moment, I
yeah.
one of the I guess the practice with purpose ideas is maybe 2 years ago now, 18 months ago, over our Christmas holiday period, our summer period, I decided to try and stretch myself, challenge myself, and that was almost to prove a point to myself initially, but I recorded part of the process with the end in mind was to be able to share it with students and my colleagues if in fact it worked. And so I did the work in order to hope that I could see some improvement and some results. And what I did was learned calligraphy, which is the art of beautiful writing, but I learnt it with my left hand, and because I was already a fairly proficient calligrapher with my right hand, but I wanted to see whether or not, or prove whether or not you could, if with commitment, dedication, and continued practice, whether you could pick it up. And over the course of 30 days, I recorded a little bit of my session every day, just practicing, and very much from the video footage of day 1, day 2, day 3, right through to day 15, 16, day 28, 29, you could certainly see growth and progress. And but I also have experienced that unless you keep practicing, unless you keep exercising those muscles, then you soon lose it as well. But you're right, in terms of sketchnoting and growing and getting better at it, I think the willingness to keep trying is important, but also so is the continued use of the skill, and the drawing and the hand lettering and all of the bits that put together to make sketchnoting something that I love to explore requires ongoing maintenance or ongoing new challenges, I think, to learn new bits and pieces. And I have found at least a motivation to keep trying to do that, because I've seen some progress, I've seen some growth, and that encourages me to keep trying.
Yeah, I love that, the aspect of putting yourself in the shoes of a beginner too, with that project where you're learning calligraphy with your left hand. I mean, especially in your role as an educator, anytime that you can like remind yourself what it's like to learn a new skill, I feel like that's always helpful because you kind of remind yourself of what your students' experience is like. But even just for you personally to put yourself in that position is a great way to remind yourself that things at the beginning, the early stages of learning a skill can be hard, or early stages of doing anything new can be difficult. There will be challenges, but you can overcome them sometimes with just, 30 minutes a day of practice or whatever that process looks like. And that might be a good kind of like transition point, speaking of new challenges, to kind of step into at least a starting question for kind of what you're up to now. And sounds like you've got some opportunities that you could explore in terms of what you're doing with your sketchnoting skills and where you might like to go next. Do you want to describe kind of where you're at with those potential opportunities, Paul?
Yeah, thank you. I guess one of my questions or challenges at the moment is to identify actually um, what am I in terms of, if I call myself a sketchnoter, what does that mean? If I call myself a graphic recorder, what's that and how is that different? Um, am I a hand lettering artist? Am I an illustrator? Because I've had a go at what I would, my version of sketch notes. When I'm at church, I have my little booklet in front of me, my journal, and I sketch note in that. And that's sort of a one page and extend it for all intensive purposes. That's for me as a reflection. I've also had the opportunity to work in a room, and there were 100 people in the room, and I had a big whiteboard or a big piece of paper at the front glued to the whiteboard, and I did my sketch notes there, recording a full day of learning and experience. We had a facilitator in the room, and I was trying to keep up and capture in what I call sketch notes. I don't know if that was graphic recording or if it was sketch notes.
Mhm.
Um, Recently I sat in an online mentoring program, and it was 8 sessions, and instead of writing handwritten notes and probably never going back to it, because as well intentioned as I might be, I know myself well enough to know that I wouldn't. So I sketch noted it, and I was listening and drawing and illustrating, and then I shared it, and the group loved it, and then they wanted access to it, and they wanted to, and in the end I was able to put a booklet of my notes together, and that became a thing that people really wanted, and that was exciting. And so now I'm not sure, I've got an opportunity to illustrate a picture storybook, um, again based on people seeing what I've been drawing or sketchnoting, and they like the look of it, they like the style of it, and I'm not quite sure who I am or what I am in terms of artist, illustrator, graphic recorder. Is it on a big stage? Is it in my notebook? Is it on a digital? Is it? And I've kind of doing all of those things and trying to work out where am I in all of that, and who am I in all of that.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, it's interesting in that there are um, not only are there many different areas in which this type of work can be useful, there also are, at this point, kind of as you've mentioned, like a handful of different professions or titles that you could give yourself, including like freelance or professional sketchnoter or illustrator or graphic recorder, or author. And to some degree, I don't think the labeling matters that much, in the sense that the core work is the same in all of those areas in terms of um, using your skills to represent these ideas in a helpful visual way. But when it comes to describing to others what you do, um, or describing the services that you provide, if you want to continue moving in that direction, then that is kind of where the language does matter, to be able to communicate what you offer and what you want to be able to do. For me, what I found to be a more helpful question than like, what am I, in terms of, trying to identify one of those labels, I have found this question to be more helpful, and that's, how do you want to spend your days? So as you think about, you could imagine a weekday, or probably a weekday or a weekend, or, for you, I feel like it's imagining, because of your, family commitments and work commitments as a chaplain. I think part of your question is, how to weave this kind of newer line of work into the things that are already on your plate. And I think that's part of the reason why, imagining what a day looks like and how you want to spend that day. Does that feel like that question helps you? Do you feel like you can answer that question of, like, how, in an ideal scenario, like, how would you like to spend your days?
Mm. That is a really, uh, it's a question I've heard before, but I've not asked it recently.
Hmm.
So yes, it is very helpful. And straight away, in terms of if I tweak it slightly, and of all of the different things I've tried, what have I enjoyed the most? What has been the most
Mhm.
pleasurable or exciting or fun? Because that's what I want to pursue.
Yeah.
Has I think the opportunity effectively to do it live, to create the. Uh, I know, like Mike Rohde talks about ideas, not art. Um, but a page of sketch notes, to me, I go back to it because there is something attractive about it. It's usable, it's memorable, it's attractive, and so to a point, I probably tip more towards um, art than not art, but the pressure and the buzz of creating it quickly in the moment, I think, is the part of it that I enjoy the most. And so,
Mm.
compared to being an illustrator who might have a block of time to create a series of pages in a book or illustrations to suit an author, and that author might have a particular image in mind, and if, as an illustrator, you either match that or you don't,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got time to keep refining it and perfecting it. Whereas for me, perhaps even as you've posed the question, it's actually the more immediate version of my notes that I actually, even though it's more pressure because people might be watching or they might be expecting it almost straight away, I almost feel that gives me permission to not make it perfect, and
Hmm.
that that releases some pressure in a way, um,
Yeah.
that I hadn't thought about until right now.
Hmm.
And that is, I think I enjoy that more, in terms of, uh, yeah, just it won't be perfect because it is immediate, because it's in the moment. And I think viewers or people in the room or people who see that or receive that or notice it later, there's an appreciation for the immediacy and the speed of it, not the art of it.
Mm.
And so capturing the ideas in a visual way quickly is an art in itself. And I think that's
Hmm.
probably the part of it that I enjoy, not the pressure of meeting somebody else's expectations, because I feel like when it's immediate, their expectations are lower, perhaps. and that lets me off the hook almost.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I'm glad you kind of did this compare and contrast between what it would be like to do some live sketchnoting or graphic recording compared to a when you're illustrating a book or you know sketchnoting some talk that someone gave or something like that, where there's this uh, opportunity for as much time as you want and also as much back and forth between maybe the person that you're making that sketch note or illustration for, because in that live setting I feel like it's the the best ratio, the highest ratio of um, your time spent and the impact that that time has on the people in the room or on whoever it is that's viewing your thing.
Mm.
And like you mentioned, there is some pressure to that, but because it is this live setting, I feel like the baseline expectations of the audience, it's it's easy to exceed those and contribute to the meaningfulness of that event simply by having this real time record of the ideas that are coming up. Um, and like you said, I would agree that the uh, much of the impact does come just from that real time record that's easy to understand. And then any of these kind of artistic elements or illustrative or overly visual elements, that's just like all these cherries on top that give it this extra punch and makes it even more impressive for the folks that are there. So yeah, I can see, and especially if you if you enjoy, if like which it sounds like is the case, that much of your enjoyment of the experience comes from that pressure and that buzz, then that's a good indicator to continue moving in that direction. Um, and just for like people listening too, like it's probably uh, this is where different paying attention to your own kind of like personality and what you enjoy is always an important thing to consider, of course, when you're deciding like where you want to go with this new skill that you're developing. Uh, because in my personal experience, I did a handful of graphic recording gigs that went well enough. Like folks were satisfied with what I had made. But for me, um, I didn't like enjoy that pressure or that buzz. Like that wasn't something that kind of it didn't excite me or bring me out in a good way in that work. It was more like I don't know, like the word dread is what I associate with that experience, maybe, which is just I think a part of my more introverted and maybe like self-conscious nature, whatever it is that results in me experiencing that in that particular way. But I just think it's exciting and encouraging, just to hear you describe that experience for you.
Mm.
I think that's great. Um, and imagining too that it seems like there's um, healthy and helpful overlap between the communities that you're already a part of, um, that might provide opportunities for you to continue doing that type of live work, either connected to your job as a chaplain, or even since you've got these inroads with folks like Hal Elrod. Like there's plenty of, well, eventually there will be again live events in those types of settings as well. I'm curious, do you even want to put like um, bounds around the type types of events that you might like to contribute to in this way? What are your thoughts on that question?
Hmm. Um, at the moment, I'm really, and probably my own, at, to my own detriment, I probably say yes to lots of different opportunities, and that can get overwhelming in itself. I've got a book project, and then another author who's sort of lined up ready, and then I've got I'm reworking some RE curriculum for another organisation in another state here in Australia, and I've got other people wanting me now to create almost a page or an idea that I've called All About Me, where I sit and speak with that person and then capture the
Mm,
parts of their story that they want to share, and I then illustrate that and do the connecting lines and the almost the mind map of their life,
hmm,
um, and and I love that opportunity, and as well as then trying to work out, well, I'd love to use my own sketch notes on a big screen while I'm speaking and telling the stories, and tr- I have tried to create those visuals live in the moment, either with a paintbrush on a big canvas or on an iPad with the projected on the big screen behind me, or I've also done it where I've pre-recorded that, and with my hand going into the screen and drawing pencil on paper type thing, pen on paper, and then being able to play that while I'm telling the story live. All of those possibilities are fun to explore, but it's part of my character, perhaps, or part of my challenge is which one of those, or do I have to restrict it to one of those? Can I kind of just go with what is available or an opportunity that is there and presenting and do that and get good at that and then try the next thing as well? Do I have to just be one? I'm, I guess I've got to answer that, but I'm not sure. Maybe I don't. People keep saying pick one thing and do that. Well, maybe in the world of sketchnoting, it could look a little different, but all still come under the big umbrella that I think I call sketchnoting. I'm not sure if you've got anything that could help me to kind of refine that question. It's a big question
yeah.
to ask as we're getting close to wrapping up our time, maybe.
Well, so I think when I think about that advice of like focus on one thing, get good at that thing, um, I feel like that advice often comes from a place of or is directed toward someone who doesn't yet have opportunities that are kind of just opening up to them. And the act of focusing on one thing and getting really good at that and putting that work out there and becoming known for it, the end goal is for that focus to lead to the type of opportunities that you're already getting in these like different fields. So uh, I think you can choose to ignore that advice so long as you are enjoying that exploration and those different types of work. um, there's no there's no reason not to continue with that diversity, because there are things that uh, there are benefits to doing different types of work in that way, because I feel like each time, I feel like I'm experiencing this now as I even just switching some of my focus and energy from like pen and paper sketchnoting, which has been my go-to since I got into this field, but then like with these kind of better tools and interesting apps, like getting excited about digital sketchnoting. So for the past 6 months or so, focusing more on that tool set to explore the opportunities that arise there. Like there's an excitement, there's an energy, there's like skill building and new opportunities associated with just that kind of switch in focus of the tool set that I'm using. similarly, I feel like in your case, as you're, using these skills in different environments with different people, and oftentimes with different tools, I feel like you're kind of rounding out the skill set that you're developing in a pretty cool way. And sometimes in ways where, you know, what your experiment with this, like, or the work that you do with that All About Me project, where you're kind of capturing people's stories in this maybe mind map like way. I feel like that type of work can inform some of the other things that you're doing, like some, you know, type of diagram or some visual aspect or something about that project is going to come up, like maybe when you're at some event like 2 months later or 6 months later, and someone starts telling their story at that event, and you can be like, oh, that All About Me project, like I've got the skills and experience to like map out this person's story in a really cool way. So there's a transfer. There's the potential for transfer of skills. I think when you choose to pursue those different opportunities. So that's exciting. Um, so yeah, I guess the my response, even what's is funny, like right after we I feel like we've kind of ping ponged back and forth between, okay, if you were to pick one, which would it be? And you mentioned these like live events because there's excitement there, and there's a lot of potential there. But then we went to this place where, but there's also like all these other things that I really enjoy doing and experimenting with as well. Um, and I think that's okay. Does it? My question for you would be, does it feel um, from a capacity level, I guess one piece, if you choose to continue experimenting with these different types of projects, just keeping the um, pace in mind in your overall capacity from a week to week, month to month standpoint. And again, this is, I feel like, a personal and personality thing in terms of how busy you want to stay, how full you want your schedule to be. That would be the only thing maybe to keep in mind if you go in that direction of continuing to say yes to those opportunities that come your way that you're excited about. Uh, yeah, you know how does the that capacity and kind of the pace um, scenario or dynamic feel to you right now, at least as you look at these opportunities in front of you?
Mm. Um, I guess for me, the word that springs to mind continues to be excitement. Um,
Hmm.
and it is certainly a personality thing. I'm convinced of it now, to keep saying yes. And I know
Hmm.
the danger of that, and I know the potential kind of knots that I can tie myself into in terms of committing to lots of different things. But that's, for me, I think part of the adrenaline and part of the fun and part of the purpose is to have lots of things. And I guess my overarching motto, perhaps, is the right word, is service, is to serve. And
Hmm.
my work lends itself to that, and that's why I'm good at what I do in my job. And turning up and sketchnoting for a live another speaker, that is there, I'm there to serve that speaker and that audience. If I'm doing an online thing, and I too have recently, and probably following your own journey into digital, I've had a go at that, and I'm starting now to turn into enjoying that and loving that as well. But I still love
Hmm.
going back to my pen and paper, and so I do like having, and I know it shouldn't, but I just really appreciate hearing you, somebody who I look up to and respect and have been a student of, almost giving me permission to to keep doing it all. And
Hmm.
I really appreciate that. That helps me a lot. I think in terms of a capacity and a ability to say yes to lots of things, I think the ones where they are more immediate are the ones probably that if they fit in my calendar, then I can do it. The longer term projects like illustrating a book, they are the ones that I think end up tying me in knots, because if I say yes to three different
Mm.
books, then all at the same time, which book am I going to work on? Which characters am I going to develop? And so maybe the adrenaline of something more
Hmm.
immediate also fits with my innate willingness to say yes. And maybe that allows me to do both of those things because it's exciting all at once as well.
Yeah. Well, it seems like what you're starting to get to is like some sort of a decision making process around which projects you choose to say yes to and
Yeah.
which ones to say like no, I don't think that's for me. And I get and resonate with the point that you just mentioned about in a lot of ways the more immediate, the more you can like jump in and do the thing and then be done with it. Like there's a lot of appeal to that compared to, you know, a book illustration that maybe you start talking about it a month before any work happens, and then you get it and you do all the drafts, and then like if the process extends for 6 months, that has a drag to it that is the exact opposite of kind of the adrenaline and the excitement that comes from the other uh, I feel like too often I feel like I think about things as a spectrum, but let's just go with it again. Like there's the spectrum from like that live in-person work where you're up on the wall, ideas are coming and like you're getting them down right away. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it's like maybe a book illustration project that in total takes a year to
Mm,
complete.
mm,
You might want to decide, okay, I'm only going to take projects that are from the middle of that spectrum all the way to the live fast
mm.
one, and like
Yeah.
not take on the ones that are on the other end of it. That's just one example of how you might uh, decide which projects to take on. But even just that aspect of connected to this question of like keep doing it all, the types of projects that you've been describing, and even though some of them might be like relatively long-term commitments, they're not it's not like you're signing up to do a job for 5 years.
No.
So that like lends itself to this continued experimentation and continued ability to do a variety of things because each is a discrete project. um, so I feel like that works in your favor in terms of continuing to be able to take those on, even if everyone is a little bit different than the last one.
Yes. Yep. That makes a lot of sense. And also your point about, you know, the All About Me project, that what I learn, what I discover, what I build in terms of a process, and the illustrations, the icons that I develop in that process, they will come out again when I'm next in front of a live audience, and
Mhm.
they become my go-tos. And because that's where I'm at a as a sketchnoter, as an illustrator, as a graphic recorder, all mixed into one. They
Mhm.
do they're closely enough in the same pencil case, if you like, um, that they do support one another. And if anything, I take out of this call, this opportunity, yeah, I guess permission that it is actually okay to have all of these. Jeff Goins talks about the portfolio life. Well, within
Mhm.
my creativity, and I have creativity in my storytelling, in my speaking, in my work, but also in my sketchnoting, and that portfolio has sub folios within it. And I think maybe for the first time I've realized that maybe that's okay, and that is just who I am and how I have some longer term projects, and they are good to sustain and develop over time. But the immediacy of other projects give me the adrenaline and the buzz that I need, and the almost the pressure to get it done. Um, and yeah, the having a bit of everything is, maybe it is achievable, and it's okay, because that's what works for me.
Yeah, I love that. And especially that last piece there. Like if it works for you, there's no reason not to continue doing it.
Mm.
No matter what the, best practices that we all tend to see. And like I feel like that gets at the shoulds of like, no, you shouldn't do all those things. You should
Mm.
focus on one thing. It's like, well, no, this other thing's working well for me, so I'm gonna keep doing it. So I'm glad that our conversation helped kind of get you to that place.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, super helpful.
any other takeaways that you feel like uh, mentioning as a way of kind of closing our conversation today?
I guess just the point to reiterate again how all of the different components of what we do as sketchnoters, whether we're just beginning, we're just got some interest in it, or whether we've been doing it for years and years. Every time you put pen to paper, or digital pencil to digital platform, every time we do it, we're growing, we're developing, and it's not wasted. And even if we don't open that sketchbook again, the not just the muscle memory, but the experience of a blank page, every time you overcome that challenge of the blank page staring at you, is helping you to grow in your confidence, in your ability, in your performance, in your willingness to make a mark on that page. And whether that's a digital page or a physical page, and I think that is my experience, is that all of these different bits contribute to me having more confidence to turn up again to the next opportunity, whether that's a personal project just for me, or whether that's something that other people might end up seeing and benefiting from. It's all going to be helpful as part of that journey, and that gives me encouragement to keep saying yes.
I love that. I think that's a great message for everyone to hear. A great note to maybe end our conversation on today. But if listeners want to follow along with what you're up to, Paul, is there a good place they can check you out and follow your work?
um, that is probably a conversation for the next time, because that is not something I'm very good at. um, yeah, I'm in the process of trying to find a home, in the sense of an online home. I do have,
Mhm.
um, I'm sort of set up. I'm called Hand Drawn Today, on Instagram, and that's sort of a platform I'm trying to build. But I'm not very good at sharing. I'm not very good at leaving my fingerprints on places like that, to be honest. And it's something I'm going to try and keep growing. But that's where to
Mhm.
find me in 6 months, and hopefully maybe even in 6 weeks. There'll be a bit more there to find if you search for Hand Drawn Today.
Sounds great. Well, I will include that in the show notes and also just point out to this came up earlier in connection with focusing on one thing too. The fact that these opportunities are coming your way through the work that you're doing, and the communities that you're involved with and how you're engaging there. I feel like that is an indication that you are doing things well in terms of how you're sharing your work and putting it out there. So I hope if that alleviates some stress. If you feel stress about posting to all the places all the time, it
Mm.
sounds like you're getting your work out there, which is great.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's fair to say. There's enough out there, that enough people have seen it, that you know there's plenty for me to keep exploring for now, for sure.
yeah, yeah. Great, Paul. Well, thank you so much for chatting today. This was a great conversation.
Fantastic. I loved it. Thanks very much. I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, this will be. I feel like I feel like almost all of these conversations that we've been having for this podcast. It'd be fun to do 6 month or 1 year check-ins just to hear where folks are at or what they're up to. So maybe we can do what would be the title of that episode? Like a bring back past guest episode, something like that. So we should try to do that.
I'd be happy to be part of that.
All right. Thanks, Paul. I'll let you go get some sleep now.
Good on you. Thanks very much, Doug.
The real middle of the night in Australia there. So we'll chat again soon.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation between Paul and I, and there are a couple of things in particular that I hope you got out of it. One is a sense for the variety of projects that you might take on with your sketchnoting skills. From live in-person events, maybe projecting your sketch notes on an iPad or doing them large scale up on poster paper or a whiteboard. Maybe you're doing them online while tapped into a Zoom call, sharing your screen in that interaction format. Or maybe you take on a long-term project where you provide some sketch notes to go along with a book. And with that variety in mind, my hope is that the second takeaway is this general encouragement to experiment and lean into those projects, or maybe a combination of projects, like we talked about with Paul, that results in this overall sense of momentum and satisfaction and excitement with your creative work. I think there is the opportunity to continue moving in the direction of that excitement and finding that balance of projects that feels right for you. So do stay on the lookout for that. If you'd like some support and encouragement while you're on that journey, I encourage you to check out the Verbal to Visual community. Paul has been a longtime member of that community, so you'll probably be seeing him around there. And I think that's a great place to, one, continue developing your skills with the new activities that I post each week, and two, hold yourself accountable to goals that you can set each month within our monthly masterminds. A video chat that everyone can log on to at the same time to chat about your current projects, talk through any challenges that you may be having, and identify the things that you'd like to be held accountable for in 1 month's time. And also keep in mind that if you sign up for that community, you get access to these one-on-one coaching calls at no additional charge. So you and I can do a deep dive similar to what you just heard. You can find more info about that at verbaltovisual.com/community or /8 for the show notes to this episode, where you can follow links to stay in touch with Paul's work. And with that, I wish you luck on whatever sketchnoting project you're working on right now, and I look forward to sharing another conversation with you next week. Until then.